How about when it comes to stress? What are some tips that we can do to manage stress and minimize stress in the workplace or especially as entrepreneurs?
Sure. Well, the very first thing that we can do is start setting healthier boundaries. One of the questions I get people to reflect on is how quick are you at putting in me time into your calendar, as quick as you are to accept business meetings, social events, and holiday plans in your calendar. Now, for many people, they'll be like, well, I don't put me time in my calendar. And I said, that's where the problem lies, because if you don't block out a meeting with yourself or just a day to yourself, what happens is you're always going to get invites coming into your calendar. And so everybody else is going to get your time, but how are you getting your own time for you? So that's the very first thing to address, because there's no point saying, I'm going to deal with stress if you just don't have the space and the capacity to do so. So the very first step is to make sure you do have the space and capacity to do so. And then the second thing is really understanding, and this is where we touch on emotional energy. It's really understanding how you respond to things that don't always go the way you imagine. Now, if you are a business owner or an entrepreneur, you will know that being comfortable with the uncomfortable is a part of the game that we must accept. And so it forces us every day to step outside of our comfort zone. Now, how we respond to that will determine if that is a stressful experience or that is an experience that fuels our growth and makes us stronger. So again, it is our relation to things that happen on the outside of us. There was I don't know who said it, but there was a great quote where it says, the event or an experience does not make you stressful, but it is your thinking about the event or the experience. And so what I got from that, Morgan, is the fact that we live in the feeling of our thinking moment to moment to moment. And
Mm.
when we can choose a different thought, it transforms the behaviors and the choices we make. And with that comes a degree of consciousness. Most of us believe that we are our thoughts, but in fact, we are merely the observer of our thoughts. And when we choose, yes, I'm going to accept this as reality, that determines the color of the world around us. And so simply choosing another thought can transform your experience of life.
This is some powerful stuff. And you just reminded me, like, for so long, I was just thinking, I was like, when's my next me time? I used to have me time structured in quite well.
Mm.
And the problem now I'm just thinking about the problem it's because it's just turned into like I think it's just one turn after the next. It's like, oh, I've only blocked in me time, but I can only meet this, I can only put this meeting on that day. Oh, screw it, just do it. Just put it in,
Mm.
do it. And I'm thinking, I'm like, that's been my mentality for so long. And it's that so how do we balance? Because I guess for me, like I'm a high performer. I'd like to
Mm.
get a lot of shit done in a very short amount of time. And I love it. And so do a lot of the people that listen here. So how do we balance the high performance attitude and getting lots of things done and also balancing me time
Mm.
and those boundaries?
I think the question we have to ask ourselves is that when it comes to now, whether you are looking to develop your career or whether you're looking to develop your business, the first thing you have to ask yourself is that, do I want to be doing this for the rest of my life, or do I want to be doing this just for a few years? Now, if it is something that you want to do for the rest of your life, you have to make it sustainable,
Mm,
because consistency always beats intensity. If you go intense and full on 24/7, what's going to happen is that at some point you're going to shut down, either mentally or physically. But if you want to thrive, you've got to build in periods of rest where you can recover, where you can step back, piece together your thoughts and experiences so you can move forward with even greater vigor. Now, the analogy I'm going to share is that of Formula One. So if you ever watched Formula One racing, you will know that all the cars require pit stops. Pit stops to either refuel, change tires, or to address an issue. Now, you cannot do that if you're constantly with your pedal down, if you're constantly accelerating, because at some point you're going to have an accident. And so for me, the first place is to ask yourself, do you want to be in this for the long term or the short term? If it's the long term, then you've got to start managing how you run your weeks, your months, and your years. And that begins with your schedule. You have to give as much importance to your me time as you do your social events and your business meetings. That also sends a very strong signal to people as to how you work. So to give an example, when I worked with a Michelin star chef here in the UK, he now blocks out Wednesdays every week for what he calls his creative day. So Wednesdays, there's no phone, there's no work. He just locks himself in the kitchen and comes up with all of these new recipe ideas. Now, if we go back in history, what we begin to understand, Morgan, is that these periods of rest as a high performer is not procrastination. It is not moving forward. It is actually very healthy because it unleashes our most creative breakthroughs. Isaac Newton, sitting under that tree, the apple falling on his head, gravity. Thomas Edison, fishing with no bait, so not even the fish would disturb him, had some of his biggest breakthroughs that he went on to pass as patents and inventions. So what that does is that when we take time out, it allows the mind to connect the dots. There's no point going out and collecting all the dots if you don't have space to connect them. And so that's what this timeout does. And it is actually one of the greatest challenges for highly ambitious individuals.
Yeah, I'll 100% test that one. I figured that out actually a couple years ago. I was getting to the point where I was edging on them, like, oh, I'm the B word, you know. And a friend said to me, she's like, you know what we did? We just took a holiday, like 4 days off. And I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean you took a day off? You took 4 days off in a row? I'm like, I'm not doing that. She's like, you got to do it. I'm like, nah. So I delayed it for weeks. And then eventually I was like, I need this. And I remember I went and did, I think, 3 days away in like a little cabin in Mount Tambourine here. So it's like in the forest, in the rainforest. And I came back. That was my highest income week I had all that year. And I only worked 2 days that week. And I'm like, I might be onto something here. And then what I noticed was about every single 90 days, I'd go and do like a 3 to 5 day trip away completely by myself, delete all my social media and just play and just be. And every single time I'd come back, just this new me, new ideas and everything. But it took me some time to get around it because it felt like I was being lazy. It felt like I was procrastinating. And it wasn't until I felt lazy only when I took time off because I wasn't being as productive as I possibly could in my other hours because I was in this space of going, when I was working, all I wanted to do was go to the beach. But then when I would be at the beach, I'd feel guilty about being there because I should be working. So when I actually allow myself to have the me time, I could do it guilt-free. And then when I worked, I was highly productive and I loved it. And I got more done in less time because I knew that I got more play coming up. And it's crazy how it just balances out like that.
I love that, Morgan. I think you touched on an important point as well. Is that there is a fine line between resting and having me time and procrastinating.
Yeah.
When you rest with intention, it is not procrastinating. So for example, if I block out in my diary Saturday afternoon to evening, I'm going to do X, Y, Z as my activity. That is resting with intention because I have a focus for how I'm going to rest and I've blocked out the time. Where it becomes procrastination is if at 11 o'clock at night, I suddenly switch on Netflix and before I know it, it's 3 in the morning and I'm still watching television. That is procrastination because now what was meant to be an evening or a day off has now gone into the next day. So that for me is understanding the difference between resting with intent and procrastination. And we've got to be careful between the two.
That's really powerful. Thank you so much for listening. And if you got value from this episode, it goes such a long way. If you can just take 20 seconds of your time, leave me a 5-star rating and written review, then screenshot this episode and share it to your story. And make sure you tag me for that shout out. And until next time, guys, go out there and dream out loud.